Light showing Thomas Lukaszuk racked up more than $20,000 in phone bills while on a trip to Poland and Israel in 2012. Now, the trip was personal, but the phone bill was related to government work he was required to do while on his trip in his role at the time as Deputy Premier. Duane, the PC leadership candidate was fairly quick to put out an apology, but could this be a nail in the coffin?
I think so. He didn't just apologize, he also almost explicitly blamed the Prentice campaign for leaking this, and that's what he said. But my question is, forget about Lukaszuk and his $20,000. I would have thought the government of Alberta would have a much better cell phone plan. You know, roaming charges did not just originate in 2012. They have been a thorn for all sorts of Canadians traveling for over a decade, and yet he racks this up. Diana McQueen's racked up a similar bill. Somehow she negotiated it down to $200. I guess she's a better negotiator than Thomas Lukaszuk. And we still don't have a whole lot of details. He claims it was government business and circulating documents, but for all we know, he could be watching videos on his phone.
Laurie, how necessary was the apology?
Absolutely. I mean, he couldn't have gotten anywhere without first apologizing. But the problem is the taxpayers are still on the hook. He's claiming, you know, this maverick status that he somehow was one of the few who stood up to Alison Redford, and yet he's saying, well, I couldn't help it. I was told to do this. I had to do government business and so forth. I mean, there are more questions than answers around this, but it really undermines his claims in the past that he was able to sort of stand up and call into question things that needed to be questioned. And then there's just this bigger question of a government that does not seem to be taking seriously the hard-earned dollars of taxpayers and exercising stewardship over those hard-earned dollars. I mean, this is a real problem for the party, and it was a problem for Lukaszuk up until he started to claim that he was distanced from what had happened in the past. Well, now he's lumped back in with the others, and I think it's really been a death knell for him.
Graham, what's the bigger issue here? The bill itself, or the fact that it was leaked? Because now we hear that Calgary Police Service will be investigating.
Yeah, I got to say, as a journalist, I get kind of nervous about witch hunts when they're trying to find a leak. You know, people leak stuff to the reporters all the time. I get a bit nervous about when they try and find the leaker as opposed to the actual substance of the leak. It's intriguing about where a leak came from, but I agree with my colleagues. You know, about this idea of Lukaszuk going off and then running up this huge bill. You know, when I was on vacation just recently, and I was paranoid about my phone being turned off. I turned it on, you use Wi-Fi, not the cellular roaming, because it's going to nail you. There's been tales all the time about people being nailed by this. I think that Lukaszuk, this looks really bad for him. I think that also, again, Duane's raised this, so has Laurie. The questions about this, what was he actually working for? What work was he doing for the government?
We read in the paper, though, that it was a publication ban.
Exactly.
There is a ban, and thus...
So we can't talk about it. So I think there's a lot of questions, and this does undermine his ability to show himself as something different. He was just somebody, again, when government, you know, spending a lot of money, and is not really accountable for it.
All right, we have 60 seconds. That's it for polling the pundits. Duane, you're up first. Who's up, who's down?
I would put up Calgary commuters. They opened up the last LRT expansion station on the weekend, and I think it's a real signal of better public transit in the city of Calgary. As far as who's down, I've got it a tie, and we've already talked about both of them today. Jim Prentice for his dumb idea on term limits, and Thomas Lukaszuk for not figuring out a cell phone plan.
All right, Laurie, real quick.
Up in the polls, it's hard to find somebody who's up, but I think I'm going to say Rachel Notley got the endorsement of Darren Villiers, so she's the one politician in Alberta who's looking good today. Down in the polls, Calgary or municipal taxpayers, the cities are not going to get their sources of funding. All three candidates for the leadership are saying that's done, and it's looking like you know, not as much will be able to be done in the big municipalities now. I think it's unfortunate.
Quickly as you can.
I was going to say both my colleagues are right. Rachel Notley is up, and Lukaszuk and Prentice are down.
Folks, great as always. That's Graham Thomson, columnist for the Edmonton Journal, Duane Bratt, chair and professor in the Department of Policy Studies at Mount Royal, and also from MRU, political scientist Laurie Williams.